Hi everybody, so this video lecture is on the concept of bias. So the purpose of these video lectures, since this is the first one of the semester, is basically just to provide you with the lecture component that you would typically receive if you were taking this course face-to-face. So these are slides that I would typically cover in class. Instead of pausing for breaks in discussion, I kind of just pose some hypothetical questions to you. So at any point in time, if I pose some questions on the slides, I would encourage you to pause this video, to take out your notebooks, and to reflect on those questions, because oftentimes those questions would be helpful things for you to unpack or explore in your weekly discussions. So I hope that you found the content for this week to be interesting. Perhaps it was challenging, perhaps it was uncomfortable or made you question some things. I think all of those responses are typical, and I think all of those responses are good. I think that the concept of bias and reflecting on our own individual biases should make us slightly uncomfortable. And I think it's something important that we continuously do. It's something I do very often, and I'll explain a little bit why throughout this presentation today. So the reason why we're starting off this course on social problems by addressing biases is because I really want you all to understand the connection between each of us as unique individuals that come from different lived experiences, that come from different backgrounds, and to understand how collectively we come to share oftentimes similar beliefs, which can lead us to having similar biases, which can lead us to feeding into certain stereotypes, which can cause us to have prejudice and discriminatory thoughts and behaviors as not only individuals, but as groups of individuals. So as we'll talk more about next week when we get more into the nuts and bolts of sociology as a discipline, you will definitely come to learn that sociology as a field of science, as a body of knowledge, is really a lot more focused on groups of individuals, on looking at societies and collections of human beings as a whole, rather than individually analyzing the thoughts and behaviors of any given individual. Now, we definitely do still study individuals, but we oftentimes will study them collectively at the group or at the aggregate level. So I think it's really helpful for us to understand how we all are individuals in our society, and in the United States, we are definitely led to believe that we are all free-thinking and autonomous individuals, that we have the ability to make our own decisions. And while there is truth to that, from a sociological perspective, it's equally, if not more important to recognize how sometimes these larger forces or these larger structures in our society really shape or influence the individual choices and behaviors that we have and make as individuals. So that's why we're starting with this concept of bias here. And it's why the first thing I ask you to do this semester is complete this implicit association test. So I hope you all had a good experience, if not good, at least a thought-provoking experience completing this assessment. So, of course, as you now know, this implicit association test is just a series of different tests that are designed to assess whether or not you hold any automatic biases regarding a number of different physical or personal human attributes, right? So you saw there were implicit association tests asking you to associate things with people of different color, of different genders, different religions, sexualities, etc. So I hope you tried at least one or two of those in this activity this week, and I hope you also completed that reflection assignment that accompanied it. So I'd be curious for you in your discussion post for this week to unpack a little bit what your experience was like completing this implicit association test. Was it challenging or uncomfortable in any way? If so, why? I say this to my students all of the time, and you'll hear me say it many, many times throughout the semester. A sociologist's favorite question is why. We are constantly asking, why do humans think or do the things that they do? And so something that I think is really important for all of you to reflect on is, why did you feel uncomfortable or challenged? Why did you maybe get a little defensive when you were looking through your results from this implicit association test? Did your results match what you were expecting? Or did you get the results that you expected? If so, why? It's not doesn't need to be a right or a wrong thing here, but I really think it's important that we engage in some of this deep reflexive work early on in the semester to really start to unpack and understand that every single one of us, myself included, have biases. It's impossible to be a human, to be a social being, and not have biases. The only exception would be for people that are being raised in a bubble, right? If you are exposed to the media, if you were raised within a family or within a household, if you attended a school, if you were educated by teachers, you were exposed to other people's ideas, and their ideas shaped who you are and the values and beliefs that you currently have as an individual. So this, of course, is referring to the process of socialization. If you took my Introduction to Sociology course, you might think back to the example that we looked at with a young woman named Danielle, who was raised in an abusive household, was neglected for the first several years of her life, and as a result, she never experienced those early stages of self-development and socialization that are critical to us as social beings to develop our mind and our ability to think and to process in the societies that we're a part of, right? And so being socialized, being raised by people, being taught by individuals, watching TV, all of those different agents of socialization affect the way we come to make sense of the world that we live in. They affect the values that we have, the beliefs that we hold. They affect how we think and come to know what we decide as true or truth in our own context, whatever that means to us. So it's really important for us to reflect on, okay, what were some of those major agents of socialization that affected me and shaped the way I view the world? For me personally, my religion was a huge agent of socialization. I grew up in a very Catholic household. I never missed a Sunday mass or a holy day of obligation growing up. And still to this day, I continue to go to church. So my religion continues to socialize me to view the world in a certain way. The difference between Daniel today and Daniel 10, 15 years ago is that today I've equipped myself with a sociological imagination, which we'll talk about this week as well in the following lecture video, which again is this tool that we use in sociology that really just reflects this way of thinking for individuals who are able to kind of understand the interplay between the choices and the ideals and the beliefs we have as individuals and those larger social forces or those social structures that really heavily influence the way we are able to even make sense of the world, right? If I wasn't raised in the Catholic Church, I would probably be a very different person today. I would probably have a very different set of values and beliefs. I don't think I would be a sociologist if I wasn't also Catholic, which some people find interesting, but to me, they really make sense together. Again, not here to talk about my religious beliefs or put anything on you. My whole example is that I was raised Catholic, and Catholics follow a very strict set of rules. And my parents made sure that myself and my siblings were following those rules growing up. Along those lines, the gender norms in the family that I was raised in really heavily affected the way I came to make sense of the world. I came from a very stereotypical male breadwinner, female homemaker family. My dad worked on the railroad full time. He was gone many nights out of the week because he worked odd hours. My mother worked part time, and her primary job was being a homemaker and a mother to myself and my siblings. So I saw that very standard, stereotypical gender division of labor growing up. And again, for my early years of self-development, that really heavily viewed or influenced how I viewed the outside world. I expected that all children had two parents and that their mothers were the ones that brought them to school in the morning and picked them up from basketball practice and baked cookies for the bake sale at school, and that their dads were the ones that were out working and making paychecks to support the household, and that their dads were the ones that mowed the lawn or shoveled the sidewalks. And so I had this really strict idea of that this is how humans behave, and this is how everyone should behave, because that's what I grew up with, and I felt a good upbringing, so that's what everyone else should have. So of course, as I get older and start being exposed to people that come from different walks of life, people from different backgrounds, people with different cultures, I start seeing, obviously, that not everyone comes from families or comes from upbringings that I was in, and that those other people, just because they came from different upbringings, doesn't make them wrong, doesn't mean that their way of living or their way of life is incorrect or inferior to my own. It just means that it's different. And so I need to constantly remind myself, and as I get older and you get exposed to more and more different people and more different walks of life, you really just start to question a lot more. Wow, how closed-minded was I when I was younger? I had these blinders up, these biases, not because I intentionally wanted to be discriminatory against people that were different from me, but it was all that I knew because that's how I was raised. If you talk to 18-year-old Daniel, I was a stubborn-ass kid. I believed my set of thinking, and it was my way or the highway, and everyone else was wrong. And I'm so grateful that I was exposed to sociology in my early years of college, because it really woke me up and it gave me this gift, this sociological imagination, to allow me to understand the ways in which I was narrow-minded, in which I was biased in my own thinking. And it also encouraged me to open up my mind to learn how different cultures, people from different walks of life, experience the world that we live in different ways. And so I really hope that you found this exercise to be beneficial to you in some capacity. Again, developing this sociological imagination, this ability to see the connection between the individual things or the personal beliefs or biases that we hold and how we actually came to hold those because of these larger social forces that affect us, is going to be a really important tool for this course. So let's go ahead and look a little bit more closely here about some key terminology that we're going to be working with definitely this week and well into this course. How do our lived experiences shape our thoughts or behaviors? Well, I kind of talked a little bit about this in my rant that I just went on about my experience, but as human beings, the starting point for every belief or for every value that we come to hold starts with receiving information, right? This information can come from many different sources. Like I said, it could come from something we see or hear on TV or through the media. It could be a newspaper headline or a breaking story that we see on the television news at night. It could be something that our parents told us. It could be something that one of our siblings or our friends told us. It could be an observation we made watching a teacher when we were younger and in school. It could have came from a boss or an employer, right? And all of those different things, family, education, workforce, religion, those are all things that we call agents of socialization, right? Which are these forces in society that teach us how to think and make sense of the world that we live in. So as social beings, we get those pieces of information, we collect them, and depending on the messages that are being conveyed by those information, we likely develop biases. All right. And so we'll talk more about what that is in just a minute here. And when we get those biases, when we start thinking certain ways about things based off the information that we've collected, we fall prey oftentimes to making stereotypes, which are these overgeneralizations that maybe aren't really grounded in fact or reason or logic whatsoever. But since we had an experience or got one piece of information that skewed us to think a certain way about a group of people or about a specific way of living, then we may develop prejudiced ideas resulting in discriminatory behaviors. So we're going to take a closer look at all of these terms in the following video here, but I just wanted to provide this pyramid as kind of a diagram to understand that as human beings, yes, we are free thinking. We do get to make choices for us as individuals, but, and this is so important to understanding the science of sociology, we need to recognize that the individual choices that we make and the decisions that we make for ourselves did not just come out of nowhere, right? We didn't think those up all by ourselves. We received messages, we received information from other people that enabled us to make those decisions, to hold those values or beliefs for ourselves. So we really need to make this connection here that no individual in our society exists in a vacuum. We are all interacting with one another, and through things like media, through conversations, through teaching our children lessons, we spread this information to other people. And so our own individual choices and beliefs are really dependent and interconnected to those of others.